It is because the Chinese New Year is time better spent with the family than in conducting cyber attacks. But just to be sure, we also double-checked what the traditions of the Chinese New Year are. Well, it includes fireworks, decorating, cleaning, but no, cyber attacks are nowhere on this list. So we have something. On a similar note, threat actors are also human beings working 9 to 5-ish. So we checked for the uptime of the CNC server and learned that the threat actors were operating in the 9 to 5 of UTC plus 8. But these two evidence, February break, UTC plus 8, are circumstantial. And in any case, they can refer to many different countries around Asia. So we still had to dig deeper. Another thing we found was that in some of the documents, the metadata was in Chinese characters. Also, some of the clusters started with an RTF attachment that was created with an exploit building kit commonly used by Chinese threat actors. And last but not least, the malware was communicating with the CNC server, and the domain was resolved to an IP historically related to another domain used by Rancor, which is a probably Chinese threat group operating against different countries around Southeast Asia. Well, looks like all of our evidence pointed the same direction. Adding the clues already collected, plus the fact that ghost malware is also commonly used by Chinese threat actors, and the attribution of this campaign becomes pretty clear. To summarize this little tale, Sandblast threat emulation was able to prevent a targeted attack against a country in Southeast Asia. Despite some misleading clues, our analysts were able to prove that this attack is real and is probably of Chinese origins. We reported our findings to our customer, the targeted country, and with this, our work here was done. But with every investigation that comes to an end, another one begins. Eye on the Nile. It was early in 2019 that Amnesty International released a report about phishing campaigns against human rights activists in Egypt. It was around springtime that our analysts found an allegedly unrelated phishing campaign targeting Outlook and Facebook. But a short analysis showed that these campaigns are actually connected using similar attack infrastructure. The threat actors in both campaigns were after email credentials with both phishing pages and malicious mail add-ons. But while in the original attack, the threat actors only sought access to email, now they're also looking for their victims' documents that are saved on Google Drive. But this was not all, and we'll get back to it in a few minutes. During our research, we learned that one of the malicious domains had an open directory. Now, what it means is that we now have access to the behind the scenes of this attack. Now, try to imagine this. Close your eyes, if you will. You're now a threat intelligence analyst. You're going over this open directory, over the perpetrator's secrets. You find some of their attack tools. You're happy. You find their SQL databases. And now you're really getting excited. And then you come across this script and you're horrified. Why is that? Let's go over it together. If the amount of queries done on the server, the one you're currently querying, exceeds 30, then send an email. The email will be sent from checknow.com to a certain devdlogana@gmail.com with this message. You exceeded your quota. Would you come and have a look? In other words, the threat actors are proactively looking for threat intelligence analysts like us going over their infrastructure, and they might soon come and look for traces, our traces. So we immediately deleted our footsteps and fingerprints and went back offline to analyze the data already retrieved from the server. The most interesting thing we found was a target list. A list of all the emails targeted in this attack. How many emails? 33. Why only 33? Most threat actors are after the big numbers, trying to maximize on their chances to get money out of the attack. If the number is so small, it means the threat actors here are after some very specific people or data. Who were they after? All 33 people were human rights activists, lawyers, academics, all known for opposing the Egyptian regime. So by now, we understand that this is a targeted attack. We know who the targets are, but who's behind it? Who are the threat actors? Well, we started thinking, is there any rock we left unturned? Any link we left unclicked? And that's exactly what we found. A link. As the malicious mail add-ons were hosted on real Google pages, they had to include a link to the developer information. And the developer info included an email that we're already familiar with, devdlogana@gmail.com, but this email didn't lead us anywhere. But it also included a domain, drivebackup.co. Now, this actually sounds like a fairly legitimate short domain, but we still wanted to know if it relates to anything that we're familiar with. So we checked our databases and learned that this domain is being communicated with by a mobile app called iLoud 200%. Now, this mobile app claims to double the volume of the ringtone of the device. Now, I know that you're all excited about this feature and already want to install this incredible app, but I'll have to disappoint you and tell you that we installed it on an Android device and learned that the ringtone was left intact. So sorry to disappoint. But we still wanted to know what this app actually does. So we scanned it with SandBlast Mobile and learned that the only thing the app does is to collect the location of the device and send it to a remote server. Remember I told you the threat actors are not only after emails and documents? Well, this is where it's getting real. Now they also have their target's physical location at any point in time. But our research question still remains, who are the threat actors? Who's behind this attack? Well, the code in the app that collects the location of the target also includes some default coordinates. Want to know where they take us? They take us to an unnamed building in Cairo, Egypt, right near a shopping mall. But we wanted to know what this building was. So at this point, we communicated or contacted the New York Times and one of their investigative journalists, Ronen Bergman. We sent him all the information we had collected about this attack, and he then sent another reporter from the UK all the way to Egypt to go look for this building. Want to know what he found? He found the headquarters of the Egyptian intelligence, Egypt's main spy agency. Well, looks like the ones spying on these human rights activists just might be the Egyptian authorities. While in Egypt, the reporter also wanted to interview some of the targets of this attack, the potential victims. So he started looking for them, but one, two, at least three of them were nowhere to be found. We then learned that they had been arrested for protesting against the Egyptian government. He did manage to find a couple of victims, though. Raja Omran, a lawyer and human rights activist, said, "I'm always worried. I never communicate anything to confidential on email." Afaf Mahfouz, an 81-year-old psychoanalyst and human rights activist, said, "I thought that because of my age, they would leave me alone, but I guess I was wrong." To summarize this story, looks like what we found was a potentially domestic attack spying on human rights activists. We reported all this information to the relevant entities, including Google and Microsoft, who took down the malicious apps and add-ons. And with this, the case was closed. Whether it's one country attacking another, a country attacking its own citizens, or cybercriminals attacking enterprises and individuals, checkpoint research detectives are there to solve the crime. And you can and you should be the detectives of your own networks. Treat every log as a clue, every packet capture as potential evidence. I will end with another saying of Poirot, who said, "The truth, however ugly in itself, is always beautiful to seekers after it." I am a great believer in the beauty and in the importance of the truth. Solving one crime mystery just might help you prevent the next one. Thank you very much.
Is a fellow of the Foreign Policy Research Institute in Philadelphia in the US. He was an officer in the US Army and eventually became a special agent in the FBI and served on the Joint Terrorism Task Force. He is an expert in counterterrorism and in cybersecurity. He is regularly quoted in the press and in fact testified before the US Congress with testimony that was described as blistering. He's regularly on the news channels, including CNN. In fact, CNN did a story on him called "Just Who is Clint Watts?" One of his interesting stories in his background was he was exchanging a conversation with a known terrorist on Twitter, and bad things ultimately happened to that known terrorist. So this is a guy not to be messed with. He is also an avid runner. So without further ado, please join me in welcoming Clint Watts. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, thanks to CPX to having me back this week. I was in New Orleans last week, slightly different weather than I'm experiencing here today. But I'd like to start off with a true story about fake news. So the very first time I left the United States was in 1993, and I flew to El Salvador. I was a college student, and I was on exchange with one of my classmates for the Spanish language. And when I landed there, everywhere I would go, I got treated amazingly. Now, my Spanish was terrible. I just barely made it over the hurdle to go on this trip. My classmate who was with me, much better Spanish, but they treated him, they didn't really care if he was there. Now, everywhere I went, they would say, "Mr. Clinton, Mr. Clinton, what would you like? Would you like drinks? Would you like to eat? Do you want to set up here on the stage?" And my escorts would go with me everywhere. They got great access. My other classmate, not so much. I'd have to be like, "Let Joe come with me. Let's have Joe." And they go, "Okay, you can bring your friend with you." Everywhere I went, this went on. And every time we left, my escorts would snicker just a little bit. On about the third trip, one of the leaders there in El Salvador says, "Mr. Clinton, please tell your father, thank you very much. Thank you very much for everything he does." My dad was a teacher in the state of Missouri. In the middle of the United States, I was pretty sure he had no idea where El Salvador was. I said, "Okay, I'll make sure and tell him when I get back." This went on all the way to the very end of the trip. They present me with a plaque, and it says, "Thank you to Watts Clinton for visiting El Salvador." My escorts snickered. They take me to the airport, and they laugh, and they said, "Just wanted to let you know, everywhere we went, we told them that you were President Clinton's son. And on every piece of paper, we erased the comma between Watts and Clinton." Now, how is that possible? Fast forward 10 years. 2003, someone would have had the internet, and they would have come in and said, "Nowhere on the internet does it say President Clinton has a son. He has a daughter. We don't know of any sons that are out there." Fast forward even 5 to 10 more years, anyone in El Salvador would have had a cell phone, and they would have probably looked it up, and they would have said, "This is a lie. Obviously, he doesn't have a son. This guy's Spanish is terrible. We've been giving prime access to his escorts everywhere he went." But fast forward 10 more years. Let's say it's today. What if before I made that trip, I made a website which says that President Clinton has a son, and I take pictures of myself and I post it all over social media, or I get a social bot and go out onto social media and spam it out there? I might be able to pull it off for a day or two. In 1993, we knew very little. We had very little information we could access, but we were pretty sure or pretty certain about what we had. Today, we have more information than ever, and yet we're less certain about what the truth is. It's becoming more and more difficult to find. In those mid-2000s, as cell phones were coming on board, I worked with a team. We were tracking terrorists around the world, not using some sophisticated cyber techniques. We used this tool called YouTube. Maybe you've heard of it. It turns out they were filming themselves. All you had to do was watch. Our students would say, "Sir, you know, you were telling me all about this terrorist group. Here are 10 videos of them in Iraq." Fast forward 5 more years, all of them had moved to most of the mainstream social media applications. I would have conversations with people in Somalia on Twitter. You could watch them on Facebook. You could watch them even on Instagram. At the same point, though, it was seen as a tool for democracy. As we all know, Facebook and Twitter overthrew authoritarian regimes during the Arab Spring. They were the heroes of democracy. Or is that the case? 5 years later, by 2016, everyone's very angry at those social media companies for tearing down democracy. So is it the social media companies, or is it us? That is the question I want to explore today. What I came to learn when I was watching and going through this experience was there was a rise of trolls, troll armies, which you all know mostly as your uncles. These individuals were extremely angry on social media, and I would get trolled pretty continuously. If I went on television before I even came out of the interview, I would have wonderful pictures like this show up all over social media of me. Apparently, they don't use spell check, but never mind that. Those are indicators, and we would begin to track them. What was interesting is they had a mission. They were there to discredit me. They wanted to sow mistrust, and they wanted to advance narratives against me. But the more we looked, I worked with 2 colleagues, the more we looked, we started to pick up other patterns. Oftentimes, there would be lovely ladies that needed to talk to you about your political views. You just needed to match with them, and they would send you a direct message. And what would be in that direct message? Maybe some malware, maybe a story. Other times they would be political partisans, and behind them you could see schools of hackers lined up. They would work with those honeypots to actually penetrate people's accounts. They loved to go after companies. If they could get into a company's databases, they would be able to pull down all of that sensitive information. They could maybe even pull down compromising information that, if disclosed out to the public, would hurt that company and their interest. By 2014 and 15, you would see widespread attacks against corporations. Maybe it's a fake terrorist attack that sends Walt Disney stocks down just a little bit. Or it could be a fake chemical plant attack that's taken from pictures long ago. Others, the most well-known of them was the Associated Press's Twitter account, gets hacked into, and a claim that President Obama has been hurt sends the stock market down hundreds of points almost instantaneously before it rebounds. Poisoned turkeys at Walmart in 2015, that turned out not to be true, and even using citizen journalist websites to plant fake stories at different times. The idea behind this was to scare people. There's 4 messages, if you're doing disinformation, that you try and advance. The first is calamitous messaging. If you can scare an audience, if you can make them feel fear, not only will they follow you to get news updates, they will also fall back on their biases. Anybody seen coronavirus disinformation in the past 2 to 3 weeks? Fear. Fear will shock the system and make you believe things that you would not otherwise tend to believe. The second type of message that you oftentimes will see will be financial. You can scare people about their finances, but you can also attack an opponent, attack a corporation that is competing against you. It's a new tool. Rather than just simply trying to beat them financially, you actually beat them with information. The third is how you infiltrate audiences. You do that with social messages. Get into people's communities through social messages. And then the last and fourth message is turn them on their political views. Drive them to an outcome that you want to achieve. We've watched this now over 5 to 6 years, and it's become a very effective low-cost strategy, not just for nations, but a whole host of interest groups, corporations, lobbyists, public relations groups. How did we get there? How did we go from the internet bringing us all together to social media tearing us all apart? It comes because of the way our internet has grown over time and how it's brought us together. If you look back to the late 1990s, there was extreme optimism about the internet. As we all know, the internet brought us all together, and now we buy each other Coca-Colas, and we smile, and we get along great. Or did that happen? The idea of the internet was preference, that you could actually choose everything that you wanted to access. And by the late 1990s, people were talking about preference as the ultimate goal of the internet. You can choose everything you want. And that if you choose everything you want, you will be happy. And we all know this is true, right? When you get everything you want, you become immediately happy. Or not so much. About 2011, there was a guy named Eli Pariser who came up with the concept of filter bubbles. The idea that when you Google, Bing, search, any internet search engine, you actually get different results based on your preferences, who they think you are, what your demographics are. That has been turned up 10 times with social media. Social media is designed to deliver you what you want from people that look like you and talk like you. It is a disaster for disinformation and misinformation. Why? Because you are choosing, you are making preferences. What people don't realize, particularly young people when I talk to them, is when you look in this phone, you are the only one that sees this version of the world. It is specifically tailored to you, to get you to buy things, to get you to look at things, to get you to come back to things over and over again. Your preferences are as much a part of it as the algorithm. You like, you share, you retweet, you block. Every time you do, you put yourself into a preference bubble of your own design. Today, the social media tail actually wags the physical world. It brings you into a physical world that is shaped by your beliefs in terms of your information. There's no separation between virtual and real. They're integrated together. How does this work? There are three biases to always think about. One is confirmation bias, and this is why social media companies can't fix this for people. It is designed to deliver you information that you want. Social media companies can't make a social media application you want to come and use that delivers you things you don't want. You would not use them. Confirmation bias. The second bias is implicit bias. If you look through all psychological, sociological research, you will tend to find that people want information from people that look like them and talk like them. And who are your friends on all these social media applications? They are people oftentimes that look like you, talk like you, work where you work, think like you think. You are putting yourself in a bubble whether you realize it or not because you're getting preferred information. And this leads to the third very dangerous dynamic over time, which is status quo bias. Once you are in your digital tribe, you only want to speak things you think your digital tribe will like. If you say something the tribe doesn't like, the tribe could push you out, or they could challenge you, and you would lower your status in the tribe. These three biases have created dramatic effects in all of Western societies. The first one I call clickbait populism, which is the promotion of popular content and opinions and the personas that voice them. The more you send something out the crowd likes, the more followers you get. The more followers you get, the more they like you. The more they like you, the more you can dictate to your crowd how they should think, how they should feel, and what they should believe. This accrual of support. People don't become leaders based on their abilities as much as how good they are on social media. This provides a lot of power to people who don't know very much. All you have to do is get people to like things, and now you can tell them what they should like, and they will probably like it because they want to stay in the tribe. We already see the effects of social media influencers, particularly in the United States, but even elsewhere, becoming political leaders. We used to say, hey, an elected leader needs to be good on television so they can get elected. Now they have to be good on social media, which has led to lots of very old political candidates in the United States trying to film themselves in their kitchens, and the videos are terrible and awfully boring. This will expand over the next 15 to 20 years to where a social media influencer has far more power than actually people that work in their field. When you talk to young people today, especially in the United States, one of the common things I say, what do you want to be when you grow up? And they were like, I'm already what I want to be, and I want to be a social media influencer. Strange. When I was a kid, people would say, I want to be an actor and be famous so I can go to Hollywood and people will pay attention to me. Now they say, well, I can just be myself in my kitchen and film myself and I'll be just as powerful or just as famous. It's a very different phenomenon from what it used to be. The next thing that this leads to is social media nationalism. This is the collective adherence to a set of beliefs that are communicated through hashtags, avatars, popular statements, account bios that look the same. When we look through how influence happens, almost always people will tend to replicate the same phrases, same hashtags. These transcend physical borders. So it ends up that people have stronger allegiance to a digital tribe than their physical nation. They will know far more about somebody, or maybe somebody they think is somebody, way on the other side of the planet, and know nothing about their neighbor. This changing of the world also comes from the fact that people spend so much time on devices. The average time on phones, depending on the survey, is between 3 and 5 hours. For young people, it can be 8 hours a day on average, 8 hours a day on a device. If you were spending 8 hours of your day looking at a device, that's 8 hours you're not spending with people that are around you. This will fundamentally change how society interacts in the future. It will make it very easy to trade on your neighbors because you don't know them. As long as it's 72 degrees, constant Wi-Fi, you will not be overtaken by the matrix. You will enlist in the matrix. You will gladly join the matrix because it feels way better than real life. That social media nationalism will change the way people interact and even how societies interact, really begging the question about physical nations. What will they be? And maybe we will integrate into virtual nations as much as physical ones. The third part is what I call death of expertise. There's a guy I work with named Tom Nichols. He's on television with me sometimes. And that's the belief that anyone that has a connection to the internet is as smart on any topic ever as anybody else in the entire world. We all know if you have kids, particularly in high school, they know this is to be true. They're smarter than their parents on everything. And this leads to people having access to more information, but yet understanding less. Part of the reason we've had conspiracies advance so far around the world in recent years is because there aren't checks that are naturally there. People are talking about all sorts of things that they don't understand. How could we ever have a cruise dedicated to the flat Earth society, the belief that the Earth is flat? You're on a cruise. You literally go over the horizon. You cannot see the other side because the Earth is round. Think about this. You could not do that without the internet and social media. You couldn't bring such a collective of people together. How did we get there? 5 generations of what I call advanced persistent manipulators. We talked about advanced persistent threats in the cyberspace. They are a part of this ecosystem that has come up now. If you remember back, this trend really started at the end of 2000s. Some of the most successful hackers, the hacktivists that were out there, what was their mission? It was to expose corruption. It was to break into people's systems. It was to deface websites. They were hacking to power influence. The next group that came along were those terrorists that I saw. What did they do? They operated on multiple platforms to engage multiple audiences in different languages around a common cause, bringing people physical migrations into places like Syria. Next level that came on was bringing all of those parts together. Do hacking to power influence, do multimedia, do multi-platform social media integration, and create what I call a disinformation fusion center, a troll farm. Bring people together and you act as though you're people that look like and talk like the audience that you are engaging. We are now in the fourth era, which I call trolling as a service. That is essentially all of these services are openly available, and you're starting to see companies jump into this game. You go and buy some social bots. You hire people to do hacking for you. You might even build your own disinformation system, or you could outsource it. And that has led to open capabilities. We used to talk about malware farms, if you remember, in the late 2000s, early 2010s. Now we're talking about social bot farms. Who can make a bot for me? Who can write a newspaper article and get it placed? These services are available on the dark web. And what's on the horizon is what I call the 5th generation. That's complete system dominance. That's censorship, surveillance, social scoring. You say what I like, and if you don't, you won't get very many points. You don't get very many points, you won't get a loan or a job or go to the school that you want. That's changing the way the entire architecture works. This evolution is no different than what we saw in cyber. I'm sure you all remember who the first hacker was. His name was Matthew Broderick in the movie War Games, right? That was a confidentiality attack. It was just kind of fun. Then you look at the escalation a few years later, Matthew Broderick again in Ferris Bueller's Day Off. He does an integrity attack where he's changing. Then what happens? Actors build on top of each other. The same thing is happening today. Today you have corporations, even individuals, wealthy individuals who have the capability to build their own media outlet, their own hacking services. They could use a social media application with a custom malware to hack into something to then disclose information about a business executive. This just happened in the last few weeks. We learned about some of these stories and how this is sort of playing. It also leads to the breakdown of information, because what you see as I look at this on the bottom left-hand corner is the most sophisticated manipulators are trying to shape your reality. The basic stuff, what hacktivists used to do, even what extremist groups did as they were trying to rally people to places like Syria and Iraq, is very small now. All they could do was maybe influence an audience or discredit somebody. But shaping a person's reality, making educational outlets, making fake universities, creating fake think tanks that support your version of history. You can literally go back now and rewrite all of history in such a way that when we talked about 1984, it is now coming up on 2024, and people will have the ability to do that. In the middle are all of these methods, and this is what my team works on today. We track who is doing all of these things, who's actually building the capabilities to do these things. Who are the best deep fake makers, shallow fake makers? Who's doing real world provocations that look real but actually are just sort of artificially developed? Or even more scary, who is building a pseudoscience that is somewhat believable so that they can convince an audience of what to believe and what to think? This dangerous new world, there are lots of actors and methods out here, and what I want to leave for you as you think about this, because you are entering this world, and now it's not just about hacking or defending systems. That is essential, but you'll need new ideas, you'll see new concepts, and you'll need new tools to really deal with this. The big one is disinformation for hire. Do you know what your competitors might do or what links they might go to, those competitors against your company, to actually do brand reputation destruction, put out fake news stories, to actually undermine your products because they're putting out false information? The second part is what I talked about in terms of the younger generation, which is social media influencers as a weapon. The most sophisticated technique I see now, whether it's a nation state, a corporation, or a wealthy media outlet, is identifying social media influencers and inserting their narrative in their speeches. You go out, you make a video, and you just drop in there over and over and over again the same message over and over and over again. Then you go and amplify that with social bots out on social media. Building these think tanks, these fake universities, takes time. You have to actually put together the content. You have to know just enough to make it believable. And there's a whole industry, a cottage industry right now, of building false information and backstopping. In fact, you might get a resume dropped in at your company, and you will go and click on all of the links in that resume, and it will take you to a website that looks like a university in a foreign country. But how often do you actually call that foreign university and say, do you even exist? Did this person ever graduate? Very rarely do we do that. You've heard a lot about social bots. People love to talk about social bots. It's something that gets people excited, but they're really changing. Social bots, when I used to get trolled, you would fire back at them, and the cheapest bots wouldn't even answer. The more sophisticated bots might answer every once in a while, but they would be operating, essentially one operator would operate 10 or 100 accounts. They didn't have time to respond back. But what if I create a bot that's an entire community of fake accounts that talk to each other? You will enter into that conversation. It'll be almost impossible to know that you're not in a conversation with real people. And if I operate all of these personalities, which just through artificial intelligence, machine learning, talk back and forth to each other, it'd be very hard for you not to know that you're in a fake reality. You're not even in a real conversation. Shallow fakes to deep fakes, synthetic media, the ability to alter this. It doesn't just lead to people being fooled, it leads to apathy. Coronavirus. I was looking at some of the misinformation around coronavirus. I saw lots of videos uploaded to social media. I quit looking at them because I could not tell which ones were real. What we need are solutions. Blockchain verification kind of solutions for content at upload so that we know what's there. The last part is what I call crowdfunding as a pathway. There are lots of people out there in this new gig economy that have to fund themselves in their research. So what do? They create a crowdfunding website. If you are a manipulator, this is the greatest thing in the world, right? You can actually fund an alternative media outlet, a social media influencer, and just send them money and tell them, I really like that video that you did, do more like that. And they would say, absolutely, just keep filling my crowdfunding site. This is an interesting pathway that's being exploited right now in terms of influence. How would we ever catch anybody funding a disinfo outlet when there is no record of any disinfo outlet that's out there? So how do we stop this, or how do we deal with this? I'm going to go through the country solutions really quick, but countries have to be the ground basis for science, data, and truth. The other thing is they have to refute falsehoods. If you're a country, you're maligned with a falsehood, and you wait and don't say anything, then what is the next story that comes out? The government is hiding something from you. Well, it was such a crazy conspiracy, maybe the government didn't think they needed to respond to you. The other part is partnering with information rating systems. I would like to see information that comes through social media be rated essentially over time, just like nutrition labels on the back of food. But I want people to know what they are consuming. Is this a news article or an opinion article? What is the track record of this outlet, fact or fiction? Put that rating up there whenever it shows up on a social media feed or a search engine, so that way the consumer knows. I always ask people, in the United States, we have crazy tabloid magazines. I remember as a kid, it would say, an alien has landed in the United States, and I would point to it, and my parents would say, no, that's crazy. Everyone knows that newspaper just makes up stories. But on the internet, people believe all of it, right? An alien landed in the United States. Let me send that to my whole family. Poof. And what do? Two of them will be like, I knew aliens landed there. Poof. And they send it out. I go back to them, and I'm like, why did you send that out? And it was like totally believable. But I was like, that magazine at the grocery store, you didn't believe that at all. Why? I'm like, I don't know. This one just seems real. The psychology of social media has changed our defenses. And that's really what I want to move to now as I close out. For companies and agencies, you are in a totally different era where you already know governments can't protect you as corporations, right? You've built up your cyber defenses. You have the tools that you're putting together. But do you have a social media policy for employees and when to engage? Not just cybersecurity, but social media as well. If I do a vulnerability assessment on a company, what time do I always check? 5 p.m. Friday night. 5 p.m. to 8 p.m. on Friday night are the golden hours for vulnerability assessment. Why? You're a little excited the week's over. Maybe you've had a few things to drink. I could engage you, and you might tell me all sorts of things about your coworkers. And what do? I start on Twitter to figure out where you're at. And then what I want to do? I'd want to go to Facebook, right, to know who your community is. But what's the gold mine? LinkedIn. If I get to LinkedIn, I know your family, I know your friends, I know where you work, I know who your boss is, and I know all of your coworkers. I can tell where you've worked before. I can see what your network is. Do your employees understand that? The other part is developing and rehearsing a playbook. Just like we do our playbooks for cyber, whenever we're having a cyber attack, do you respond to a smear campaign? There's always several scenarios I throw at people. A conspiracy comes out. It's retweeted, amplified, shared 100 times. Should you respond? Probably so. The longer you wait to respond, the more the conspiracy takes off. However, a troll who has one follower yells at you, and the company immediately shouts back at the troll. What just happened? They just gave the troll 100 new followers. You have to war game when you should engage and when you shouldn't engage. The last thing to think about is tools. Not just real-time brand protection, but speed is essential. And I'll come to that in the conclusion. Content development and dissemination. How will you quickly put out those press briefings, those refutations, and who will do it? Corporate media, social media account. Do people pay attention to those? No. Who do they pay attention to? Social media influencers. Who's the social media influencer for your brand and for your company, and how can they get that message out and help you amplify and refute it? The last thing is I always have key network monitoring. People mostly try and block out their trolls. I am one of the rare people that love my trolls. I watch my trolls. I pay attention to everything they say because that is your reconnaissance. That's how you know that you have a smear campaign. That's how you know that maybe you've been hacked and data has been dumped out there about you. Love your trolls because they will be the ones that tell you when you need to respond. I'll conclude with this. It ultimately comes down to people and citizens. 1, determine the cost and benefits of social media use. Why do we continue to do something that makes us so miserable? Doesn't make any sense. No one is obligated to use social media, but we still do it. I do it too. I'm guilty of it. I'm not better than anybody else. The other part is valuing human connections more than virtual connections. The person to your left or right, should something go wrong in your life, will actually be there for you. The fake person on Twitter, Facebook, all these social media applications will not. They'll say, sorry, so sorry about what happened. Know the source of the information that you consume. I always give people these 3 tips. Whenever you're taking information on the internet, 3 things to think about. 1, do you physically know where this outlet is and who and where they produce the content? If they won't tell you where they're at, it's probably because they don't want you to know where they're at. Maybe because they're not telling you the truth. The second thing is, do you know who made it? Who are the actual people that made it? Anonymous post, bylines from pseudonyms, it's not really worth your time. The third part is, how do they make their money? If you don't know how they make their money, but they can send you 100 fake news articles a day, chances are they're being funded by somebody who doesn't have your best interests in mind. Listen more than you speak, read more than you write, watch more than you film. Our children will be the first generation that can produce far more content than can consume content in any given day. The last and most important thing that I want to leave with you today is understand what you tend to believe. Through all propaganda, research, psychological warfare, there are 4 things that you will tend to believe. That which you see first, that which you see the most, that which comes from a trusted source, that which is not accompanied by a rebuttal. 4 things. First, most, trusted, no rebuttal. Sound familiar? That's social media for you. Hey, look at this. Over again. Trust me, don't trust them. Trust me, don't trust them. Block them out, they don't know what they're talking about. That's modern politics, by the way. That also is your solution if you're dealing with disinformation in this new information space for your company. First, most, trusted, no rebuttal. That means you got to be fast, over and over again in your rebuttal. You have to be honest in terms of what you put out. And the last part is you have to get in the minds, you've got to get in the space of that audience that you want to convince. Thank you for having me here today at CPX. My book is Messing with the Enemy, and I hope all of you survive in this social media world.
Only 6 weeks into his checkpoint journey, our next speaker is a husband, a father of 3, a lifter of weights, and protector of clouds. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the founder of Protego and now Checkpoint's head of cloud go-to-market strategy, TJ Gonen.
Hey. Okay, so actually the guys in the production asked me to give them back 5 minutes. So if you saw me speak earlier, this might be actually faster. So brace yourself. Let's start with a piece of good news. Geek is the new sexy. It's really important actually for us. We were just talking in the backstage. Being geeks was never so much fun. You know, we grew up in Israel. Your mother wanted you to be a lawyer or a doctor. Now, definitely in Israel, everybody, the mothers wants the kids to be programmers, startup entrepreneurs, cybersecurity people. There's movies about us. Geek is the new sexy. Be proud of it. Celebrate it. This is a good time for us geeks. Be a geek. So I'm going to talk about the Devops mentality and this shift that we're seeing in the world into software automation, infrastructure as code, DevSecOps. You've been hearing a lot about it. You're going to hear more about it in the next couple of days, and just generally speaking during your life. So DevOps, but the pictures that you see here, check me out later. If you Google DevOps engineer, all the pictures, Google images, that's how they're going to look like. So now you know that a DevOps engineer has a beard, he's a bit overweight, and he looks like that. Check me out. That's the way they look like. Now, this new DevOps mentality, this new developer-centered world, is what's really happening around you. And the idea of DevOps, when you Google the term DevOps, you'll run into a lot of terms. Software automation, development automation, continuous integration, CI/CD, you all heard these terms. At the end of the day, what these people are trying to do is to automate continuously the development of software and shipping it and making it run. If an old manufacturing line for development used to be very manual, you remember the days? Every 3 months we release a new update. The new manufacturing line, whether you're experiencing today in your organization or you will experience it tomorrow, is automated. It looks like this, like the picture here. They want to deliver all the time, continuous delivery. The time difference between writing a piece of code and the time it actually runs somewhere is shortening, and the developers, your developers in your organization, they want it to be zero. And from a mindset perspective, as you know, developers and security don't really go together. At the end of the day, it's not their job. So as far as they're concerned, the fact that they are now using 100 microservices and now they're launching 5 new accounts in the cloud and they're using open source. They write a piece of software, they go to a garbage can, they pick up a piece of code, they put it in it and they run it. It's your problem. Deal with it. Yes, I'm going to change my software 5 times a day. Deal with it. Yeah, it's going to be in the cloud. Oh, just a second, in another cloud. Oh, just a second, let me launch 5 more of these. Deal with it. Your problem, deal with it. I'm a developer. What do you want? The business pays me to run super fast. Now, our mindset in this world of running super fast, think about it. They want to run fast. Security, in the perceived concept of developers and business people, is literally the opposite of fast. We're the anti-Christ of fast. Someone wants to run really fast. What do we say? Whoa, 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 whoa. Just a second. Just a second. Let me configure my firewall. Let me scan the code. Let me make sure that we're compliant. Give me 2-3 weeks. That doesn't work in today's environment. This is how we look like in the world that needs to move fast. This concept of guardrails, right? We like guardrails. By the way, think about the concept of guardrails. Close your eyes, visualize a guardrail. Does it sound like fun? It sounds limiting. It sounds like if I'm trying to move really fast, you're going to electrify me. Doesn't sound like fun. These guys want to run fast. We look like bumpers. Every time they want to run fast, we're bumpers as security people. The biggest challenge with this thing is that we lost the battle. You cannot say no. Johnny, the CISO for Checkpoint, is going to present tomorrow. Try to ask him what happens if a development organization wants to launch something new in the cloud somewhere and Johnny says, whoa, no. He's going to lose the battle. The world doesn't belong to no anymore. But we live in an age of yes. You have kids, right? Most of you look above 18. You have kids. When was the last time you said no to your kid and he was okay with it? Kids today, I remember when I said no, my dad asked me something and I said no, it was okay. Worst case scenario, he'll slap me a bit. Today, you say no, it's like the kid says, what? What do you mean no? It's like like a blue screen, general protection fault. What do you mean no? You know, I live in the US. It's this age where you order like a 5,000-pound TV, you click the button, you swipe, buy now, you get a text, your TV is on its way. I said, what? 2 minutes after, 2 hours delivery, knock on your door, the TV it's now. It's a world of now. No is not an option. You lost the battle. The problem is that this new job description is not security anymore from the developer perspective, from the business perspective. It's stay out of the way. That's your job description. Stay out of the way, because you can't say no, but you still need to be there, which is a huge issue. You still own security. So the biggest challenge for us in this next generation, that is not, security is super important, but it has to stay out of the way, is how do we balance this thing? How do we actually work with developers and with the DevOps culture, this automation culture, in order to still deliver a secure continuous business. So I'm going to give you 2 tips. We only don't have a lot of time, so I'm just going to give you 2 tips of the way that I think about it, and maybe it will help you. There's 2 steps. Step number 1 is what I call trust. Build trust with your developer and DevOps operations. In order to build trust, you need to understand them. So think about it this way. The road, you can't say no anymore. You have to find a way to say yes, right? Find a way to say yes. The road to yes moves through no with a K. You have to know what they are going through. I'll give you a very simple example. The life cycle of a developer is he writes a piece of software, he deploys it. He moves on to the next software, next development. If you come back to him after 2 days and say, hey, man, you have problems in your code, he hates you. He moved on. He doesn't even remember what he wrote 2 days ago. He's probably in the 3rd version of the code he deployed. And he's deploying it through a CI/CD, continuous integration, continuous deployment pipeline. If you're not there, you come back to him after a week or 2, he's gone. So in order to understand the experience that you need to solve to, you have to understand what the experience is. You need to understand the DevOps people and the developer, what is their life cycle. You need to hug a developer. So task number 3 for you guys, when you go back home to your company, find the first developer you see. If you're in the US, ask for permission. If you're in Israel, just do it, hug him. Say, dude, I love you. I know it doesn't look like that, and I know it looks like I'm just trying to be in your way. I actually want to know, what does your life look like? How do you deploy code? How fast do you move on to the next thing? What does that look like? And then you need to develop solutions that live inside his context. So for example, if you want to do vulnerability scanning, all the power to you. Do it at the point of deployment. Not 5 days after it's already running. Do it at the point of deployment. You want him to put permission. I can tell you in the cloud, for the ones of you that deal in the cloud, he's deploying all these microservices and he needs to give them permission. What do they need access to? The Lambda functions, containers. And you're asking him, hey, what do you need access to? He says, I don't know, everything? Of course everything. Everything doesn't break anything. Now you want to sit with him and configure it. No, give him tools to automate that piece. Give him a tool that says, hey, use this. This will automatically, for example, generate permissions, check them out. If they're good, go with it. You helped him do his job securely. You didn't add work to him. You removed friction, and you're in his context. So the concept that I want you to think about is stop thinking about guardrails, even though I know all of you here love guardrails. Stop thinking about it. Think about a paved road. Okay? A road. And you say to the developer in DevOps, hey, this is a road I built for you. As long as you stay there, I'm fine. Use this tool. Generate permissions. Use this tool to check vulnerabilities in the point of deployment, at the point of deployment. Between us, security people, if he moves from the road, electrify him. I don't care. But first, give him the road. Talk his language. So that's number 1. That's the trust. And again, in order to build trust, you have to understand what he's going through. The definition of done, you know you got there. When you say, hey, use this, as long as you use this, we're fine. Now, the problem is that obviously you can't trust everyone all the time. And it's a dangerous world, and he might go around the tools, and maybe there will be a malicious actor and he will come into your runtime environment. So at the end of the day, after you trusted the developer, you have to build a no-trust mindset. And the no-trust mindset says, hey, listen, I love you and I love all of you, but I'm going to assume that something bad is going to happen. That if you put something in the runtime environment, it's not going to be configured. I'm just going to assume that you're going to launch 5 new cloud accounts without me knowing. So I need to make sure that these things are protected, even though you went around my paved road. The key to the no-trust concept is to automate zero trust. Because you cannot think about it, he's deploying 5 times a day. If you now want to do zero trust, for example, you want to make sure that there's a firewall in front of it, that the workloads are protected, that you checked for vulnerabilities, and if there's something misconfigured, you can fix it. You cannot do this manually. For the ones of you that are in organizations that are already moved to modern application infrastructure and cloud, these things happen 50 times a day. You ask accounts, hey, how many cloud accounts do you have? They say 50, just a second, 60, just a second, 70, 80. It's a click of a button. They launch a new account. In order to think zero trust, you have to automate zero trust. So the automate zero trust means that if a new account is getting launched, automatically there's whatever you want to happen for a protected account. A firewall gets launched automatically in front of it to prevent threat. Workload protection, whether it's functions, containers, attached to the workloads automatically. Profiles get created automatically. Compare it to PCI benchmark. If there's something wrong, automatically remediate. It has to be automated because your customer or what you're trying to protect is automated. So you have to automate zero trust. And the definition of done here, you know you got there when you say, hey, use this. If you use this, we're fine. And go for it. Because protection is always going to be there. And it's as automated as your development cycle. The way to think about this, the trust zone is development, build, and staging. That's the trust. That's where you trust people. You help them there. You give them paved roads there. The runtime environment, whether if it's in a cloud, it's a production environment, or if it's on-premise, your production environment is zero trust. You don't trust anyone. You make sure that protection is always there, no matter how the workload or the application got there. So these are the zero trust area and the trust area. Part of the issue is that for us security, we don't build this automated manufacturing line. Our current manufacturing line looks like this. It's very, very manual. In application security, if someone here in the audience works in application security, it's the definition of this thing. Give me 3 weeks to put my firewall in learning mode. 3 weeks, it's going to change 5 times. Your learning is irrelevant the minute it started. Let me talk with this guy to do vulnerability. It can't be. It has to be automated. Use these 2 days, and Dorit is going to talk later about what we're doing. You're going to have one-on-one meetings. Go see the tech rooms. We think automated. We understand this thing. A lot of our roadmap and our effort at Checkpoint is put into building automation into the trust area and into the zero trust area. So spend some time in the tech rooms, listen to Dorit's presentation. We're going to talk about a lot of these things and how they integrate into our CloudGuard family and into our other products. Just want to finish with a story about why automation is important. So this is a picture from Israel. They're now driving these electric scooters. I actually saw them here. No helmets, by the way, super dangerous. If you've ever been to India, someone been to India recently? No one? Good. Try to drive in India. Look at the Google image or Google video, driving in India. It is crazy. It's insane. Insane. I wouldn't drive a tank there, how dangerous it is. But there's like millions of scooters all over the place. Millions. And no one wears a helmet. No one wears a helmet. And I'm seriously, YouTube video this thing. It's unbelievable. And when you stop people, so I was there and I said, what? Super dangerous. And you ask people why they don't wear a helmet, even though the roads look like this and it's so crowded, on a scooter, super exposed. You know what the answer is? Any guesses? Sorry? It doesn't look cool? Almost. It's very simple. It's not comfortable. Not comfortable. People will sacrifice security for comfort any day. If you don't make it easy for your developer in your DevOps environment, they're going to go around you. They'll sacrifice security. None of us wore seatbelt before it was a law. You have to make it easy. And I want you to remember, whatever you're working on right now as a security project, with Checkpoint, outside Checkpoint, whatever you're working on, you ain't done. You're not done until it's automated. You finished a project, you think you finished it, it's not automated, you're not done. You have a next milestone. You have to automate everything. If there's a manual part in your process, you're not done. Demand automation from your vendors, from your partners, from whoever you're working with. Ask them, is this automated? Otherwise, you'll be like this guy, and this guy will get his ass fired. Make sense? Okay, thank you very much.
John. Great. We have our last presenter of the morning, a short presentation. it's from Microsoft, and many of you know that we have a close working relationship with Microsoft. In fact, on the Azure cloud platform, Check Point is the preferred security vendor. So our next presenter has been with Microsoft a long time, in fact, since 1999, when Microsoft was first the evil empire. He knew I was going to say that, so I got that cleared, so we're not in trouble. Ralph, as I said, has been with them a long time. He is the CTO for partner development here in Europe, and he lives in Munich, so I guess he had a short drive over here. Anyway, please join me in welcoming Ralph Kink. Thank you.
Thank you.
Cheers.
So thanks everyone who's staying in the room despite the lures of lunch outside. I'll try to be brief and concise, so bear with me. So I would like to start the presentation by talking about what we call tech intensity. My boss, Satya Nadella, who runs Microsoft for the past 5 years, termed this. And tech intensity is about the way we change the technology discussion with our customers. So I'm with Microsoft for 20 years. I'm in the IT industry for 25 years. And I feel the last 20 years I spent time talking to IT people. I'm an IT person, and I spend time talking to IT people. But over the past 5 years, this has completely changed. We now spend most of our times talking to business people within the customer. We talk to CEOs, sales leaders, marketing leaders, product developers, and so on. And the main reason for that has to do with data. And you probably all have seen similar slides like that, slides that say the amount of data humanity is creating doubles every 18 months or so. I don't know the exact numbers, but we are creating data at an incredible speed, incredible amounts of data, and you just see some examples here. Autonomous vehicles, they create 5 terabytes of data per day when customers like BMW are testing them. So autonomous driving is one of our favorite topics as a cloud provider, not just because I'm a German, but because it's really interesting to help our customers work with that data. But you see a lot of other examples of how our customers and everybody on the planet is creating data at an incredible speed. And obviously, data is the gold of the future. It's the most important asset of any company doing digital transformation. But as Gil said this morning, once you lose data, you can never recover that trust. And as Microsoft, we are heavily investing building this trustworthy infrastructure, building data centers that enable trustworthy computing, that enable a trustworthy cloud. And I just wanted to show you 2 pictures around that, just to give you an impression what the scale of this really is. So what you can see on this picture is one of our larger data centers. It's at the US East Coast in Virginia. And this is like a mega data center. You see 2 generations of data center infrastructure here. To the left, you see classical data centers. To the right, you see a 40-foot container type data center where we just plug those elements together to be faster in how we build the data centers. And this is a huge data center, the size only very few companies on the planet can build. And on the next picture, I want to show you what our plans for the future are, basically. So this is how we made space for a really huge data center. Just to give you an impression on the speed of investments we are driving and how fast we are preparing for all that data inflow that we need to handle in a very secure and trustworthy way. But building data centers that are the foundation for a trustworthy cloud is obviously not the only thing we need to do. I chose this picture. It's actually a ship that we rented, and probably only a few people know that Microsoft is now also building global networking infrastructure. So this is a ship we rented to build sea cables, to lay sea cables across the North Atlantic. So we're building our own fiber infrastructure around the planet, the North Atlantic through the Pacific, because we feel that as a hyperscale cloud provider, we also have to build this reliable and secure and trustworthy base infrastructure. Obviously, we will not cover the whole planet with our own cables. That's not the objective here. But we feel that we need to also on the network side have a a reliable and trustworthy infrastructure in place for our customers. Moving to the other extreme, I wanted to show you this picture because it ties very directly to back to security. What you can see here is the Azure Sphere device. Actually, the Azure Sphere device is just a chip that you see on the photo. It's just a chip in the middle of the board. The rest is just an evaluation board. It's a chip with a Microsoft logo on it, and this is very unusual. We are not in the chip creation business usually. The Azure Sphere device is an IoT infrastructure that's completely managed for the customer. So basically what we're building here is a Linux-based IoT device that the customer not only doesn't have to manage, the customer cannot manage the device. It's a closed device, it's completely locked down. Everything around updating, patching, securing the device, securing the communication between the device and the cloud is done by the Microsoft Cloud. And the customer will only put a piece of code on the device and say, okay, please execute that piece of code. Everything else is Microsoft's business. So we're completely unburdening the customer of taking care of security. And I think this is a really important step because many companies will just want to out-task this, want to get rid of the burden of having to manage IoT devices. They want to focus on their core business of building the logic and the infrastructure for the device. So, in summary, this leads to an effect that we call democratizing technology. We build those massive data centers, we build infrastructure, we build IoT-capable hardware, and this makes bleeding-edge technology available to anyone. And if you look at how innovation was driven in the past, it was driven by large corporations like Siemens or GE or what have you with large R&D budgets, or by very well-funded startups. But today, everybody who has a credit card has access to the same bleeding edge technologies that all the other companies have. And this completely changes the dynamics of how innovation is driven. Everybody can innovate on the latest technologies. You can get a quantum computer from the Microsoft Cloud today, even though that hardware doesn't really exist yet, but in theory, everything is available to anyone at any point. This has severe implications on security, I think, because you will see a lot of people creating applications and digital infrastructure far outside what was usually controlled by IT governance. So in our worldview, you have this intelligent cloud that we're building as the secure and trustworthy brain, and you have the intelligent edge that is comprised of all kinds of devices, of secure devices, of cell phones and what have you. You have this this concept of ubiquitous computing, where you have computing resources all over the place. And yeah, I guess this is the world you're managing every day. Tons of devices and infrastructure that is very hard to manage. And I was very excited to hear this morning Gil's strategy for making this easier for you in the future. Because if you look at this, there is simply no perimeter anymore to protect. It's this big net of interconnected things. I guess I could talk about artificial intelligence for a long time. I only have like 2 minutes for you today. Artificial intelligence is, of course, a great tool for helping you do your job in security, and Check Point is building AI-based solutions to help you. But artificial intelligence is a security topic in itself in a very, very interesting way. So I would like to introduce Tay to you. If you have not heard of Tay, it was the very short-lived first attempt of Microsoft to let an AI loose on the internet. So basically we created an AI, a chatbot, that was goaled on accumulating followers. So it was a conversation chatbot, it was let loose on the internet, and its goal was to find followers. And it did find followers, but in a very unexpected way. So people started feeding Tay with racist and sexist phrases. And when Tay started repeating those phrases, Tay got more followers. So in the course of 24 hours on the internet, the Microsoft Tay chatbot was a full-blown racist. So this was the unhappiest day of our PR department ever. and it was extremely embarrassing for everyone at Microsoft. But today, actually, we like to talk about it because it was a great, great, great learning for us. It showed us that if you are not very cautious with things like that, if you don't think things like that to the end, if you don't think them through, you run a high risk of being manipulated. And I don't have the solution for that. It's just maybe some homework for all of us. Artificial intelligence is a cybersecurity threat in a very different way from other threats. Artificial intelligence systems can be manipulated like human beings. They can be fed false learning impulses. And this is very dangerous, and we are just at the start of thinking about how we solve this. Now, if you connect that story to what Bill Clinton's son just told us 30 minutes ago, you see how big the scope of this problem is. Now, back to our daily business of cyber defense. Microsoft also runs a very broad cyber defense operation systems. We have huge telemetry from Windows, from Azure, from Office 365, from authentications in our Azure Active Directory. And I guess just like Checkpoint, we see the ugly truth of cybercrime in the internet every day, and we are partnering with Checkpoint to make that as trustworthy as possible, because trust is the most important thing for a hyperscale cloud provider like Microsoft. People will only put their data into our cloud and into our data center if they completely trust us, both from a privacy, from a security, and from a compliance perspective. And as a company with customers around the globe and with 10 years experience in cloud computing, we know that there is zero tolerance for error. We cannot do this the wrong way once. We have to be always correct about this. And I would want to double click on Microsoft's approach to security and trust, and we have 3 basic pillars on that. I just talked about the intelligence that we have, how we learn from our products, how we learn from the telemetry to build better and more secure infrastructure and products. And we will always build a secure platform. I think on Gil's slide, the native cloud security was like in the lower corner. So we will always build this basic infrastructure, and we will always have a basic portfolio of security offerings. There is no point in having antivirus scanners from several vendors in the market. This will just be built into Windows for the future, because there is no differentiation in that anymore. And if there is a virus on a Windows machine, it would always come back to Microsoft. So that's why we make sure that we perform well here with the basics. But everything else, that will be partners. And Checkpoint is the most successful partnership that we have in the security space. And for us, there are 4 important components in our collaboration with Checkpoint. We have a very close engineering collaboration. Our engineers work with Checkpoint's engineers to build the very best products, and then to integrate those products as seamless as possible and build complementing offerings. We cover the basics, but everything on top of the stack, anything, as Gil called it, Gen 5, Gen 6 security, that's not something we will cover out of the box. That's something where we partner with Checkpoint. And the last piece I called operational convenience. That's also very important to us. We partner also from a sales and project and implementation perspective with Checkpoint, because we want to make it as seamless and as easy for you as possible to use our complementing products. So this highly sophisticated slides just shows how our portfolios complement. On the Azure side, you have CloudGuard IaaS and you have Dome 9. Even if it hurts me, I know that many customers will use AWS and GCP in addition to Microsoft, so multi-cloud support is very important to us. And then you have SandBlast for all your mobile applications, and then CloudGuard SaaS for complementing what we already have in terms of security features in Office 365. So this is just a rough picture of how we are working to make sure that our products work very well together for your convenience. Now on the last slide, I will do a demo. I've learned that at CPX, you can do demos without having a PC on stage. So I do a slide demo. This demo just shows you how easy it is to purchase and deploy Microsoft Checkpoint products in the Microsoft infrastructure. You see here 2 screenshots from our Microsoft App Source marketplace, and on the right side you see the Microsoft Azure marketplace. So we want to make it very easy for you to roll out the products into Azure. There are very simple descriptions on how you can implement, for instance, CloudGuard with your Azure environment, and both from a technical as well as from a deployment and also sales, how you purchase the stuff, how you procure the stuff perspective. We try to make it as easy and as seamless as possible. So, Checkpoint is our strongest partner. We are building the secure infrastructure. We are very excited about the innovation Checkpoint brings to our cloud, because the security of our customers' data is most important for us, and we count on the partnership with Checkpoint to never lose that trust. And as such, I hope you enjoy your lunch, and thank you.
Oh, don't go anywhere for 1 second. Thank you. Thank you. Good to see you, Ralph. Appreciate it. Cheers. All right. So we are moving towards our lunch. It's going to be out there for a while, so there's no real rush. I wanted to go through a couple of things first.